Okay, so I was scrolling through Twitter the other day, and I saw this post that was praising the cinematography of The Last Jedi. First of all, yeah, I've not seen much of the film, but Rian Johnson's cinematography is consistently good in his work. Just look at Knives Out. Anyways, I was just glad that Rian Johnson was getting some praise for the cinematography of his films, because a lot of the discussions I've seen are about the writing. But then I checked the replies.
Oh, don't you mean blue screen?
This isn't cinematography, it's made by a computer.
When you like special effects and know nothing about cinematography.
CGI is not cinematography.
You are wrong! All of you are wrong!
None of these make sense, they're all wrong and stupid. Okay, calming down. Right, so if there's anything to take away from those comments, it's this. Number one, a lot of people have wildly misinterpreted what cinematography actually is. And two, people are way too mean about CGI in films. Okay, so let's address the first one. The Oxford Dictionary defines cinematography as the art of photography and camera work in filmmaking. And yeah, I'll admit, it seems like I've been immediately caught out with the term camera work, but just bear with me. You're probably used to seeing a camera in the form of a phone, a DSLR, or maybe even the huge cameras that you might see on a film set. But cameras don't have to be physical. That's not a joke, it's not even an opinion, it's just fact. A camera is just a device that's used to capture an image. And while I'm not an expert on 3D animation, I'm well aware that a lot of 3D software uses cameras to determine what parts of a scene to render and in what way. Just because none of it's physically there doesn't mean it's not been captured with a camera. It's like colour. You look at a painting and you'll see that it's made up of lots of different colours. That's just how paintings work. If a painting is digital, the colours on it are still there. They're still real colours, because without colours the painting can't exist, it's not there, you can't make a painting without colours, that's just impossible. Same goes for cinematography. Without cinematography whatsoever, a film literally does not exist. Technicalities aside, a major part of cinematography is the message that a shot conveys. Whether it's something simple like camera angles or movement, or the position of a certain object within the frame, different shot types mean different things. It's one of the most basic rules that's taught in every beginner's film class ever. For example, a low angle shot would imply superiority as we're looking up at the subject, and a high angle shot would imply inferiority because we're looking down at the subject. That example is extremely basic, and in reality, all of these things are taken into consideration in every shot of a film. Because of the many layers of information that cinematography alone can carry within a single shot, each and every shot is meticulously planned with both a shot list and a storyboard. The shot list usually details the specific techniques such as angles and camera movement, whereas a storyboard is better at making sense of visual elements such as framing or how objects within the frame will act. This doesn't just apply to live action shooting. See, determining what shot types will be used is down to the director of photography. That's the whole job. This is because they have the best understanding of the rules of cinematography and how best to use them to correctly convey the director's intended message. Every film that's praised for its spectacular cinematography wouldn't actually receive that praise if it weren't for their respective DOPs. So let's take a look at the credits of a 3D animated film. For my example, I'm going to use Toy Story 4. If you look at the credits, you'll see under cinematography the names Jean-Claude Kalash and Patrick Lin, the directors of photography for that film. And while they weren't able to be present on set and tell the camera operators how to work the shot, their role in the film would still be pretty much the same as if they were working on a live action film. Just because it's CG doesn't mean it's less important. That brings me on to my next point. Far too many people are way too mean about CGI, claiming that it's unnecessary or ugly. The main criticism that a lot of people have with huge blockbusters like the MCU, DCEU, or the Star Wars movies is that so many of their scenes use CGI, and that's it. I don't like this film because not everything in it is real. Firstly, duh, these films have so many fantastical locations and characters that are impossible to pull off using any other technique. And before anyone starts referring to the original trilogy and how they couldn't use computer graphics because they weren't as advanced back then, you've got a point, but the VFX they use is essentially the same, just minus the computer. While there was no CGI involved, green screen was still crucial in making the film look the way it does today, and a lot of the backdrops, like the scenes on Imperial spaceships, was simply painted as opposed to the more modern method of modelling them with CG. Jesus Christ, try saying that 3 times fast. So why did film studios ever stop using this method? The simple answer is there's no point. Sure, a lot of the effects in the original trilogy still hold up to this day, and some of the techniques that George Lucas pioneered are revolutionary, especially for special effects, but now that similar effects can be pulled off much more effectively with CGI, it makes no sense not to. That doesn't mean to say that computer graphics is always the best solution. Often, practical effects might be the more desirable solution due to the phenomenon known as the uncanny valley. This is where minuscule, undetectable details about people or objects that we are used to seeing in our everyday life aren't translated into CGI, and that makes it much easier to detect. Take Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars Rogue One. Yes, it's really well done and it's very convincing, so many of the details are meticulously added by CG artists, but there's still one or two things that you can't quite... Wait, he was played by Peter Cushing? Like the Doctor Who guy? No way. Anyway, back to the video. It's really well done and so many of the details are there. It looks exactly like Peter Cushing, but there's something a little bit off about it. You can tell that it's CGI. That's what the uncanny valley is. What's really funny to me though is that so many people will find these examples of modern, critically acclaimed films and brag about how they weren't one of these huge CGI messes like Avengers Endgame was. Mate, I have some brilliant news for you. Because these great CGI-free masterpieces that you love so dearly almost definitely use computer-made special effects. Bohemian Rhapsody's Live Aid scene was shot on a runway. Even Parasite, you know, the one that won 4 Oscars this year, uses CGI to construct that big fancy house where the majority of the film is set. But I've never seen anyone complain about how lazy Bong Joon-ho or David Fincher are. The most annoying thing about these criticisms though, in my opinion, it's the implication that using CGI is lazy or a cheap cop-out technique. CGI isn't real filmmaking is such a disrespectful, uneducated opinion. The reason being that CGI is still an art form. It's still a type of animation and it takes years of practice just to create something that's even considered acceptable. You wouldn't say that Pixar movies are lazy, and they're entirely CGI! On top of that, creating CGI for a film is an extremely time-consuming process. You need a lot of attention to detail in 3D animation, and a shot that you'll watch for about 5 minutes probably took months of research and scrutinous work just to look right. Corridor Crew's series VFX Artists React To is a great way to see how much effort goes into shots that most people don't think twice about. And yes, I understand that not all CGI is executed well, and sometimes it's used in places where it really shouldn't be. But saying that some CGI is too obvious or that it didn't look good is a much more valid criticism in comparison to just saying CGI is bad and disregarding any scene that uses it. If you wanted to go one step further and explain why it didn't work, more power to you. The proper way to criticise CGI in a film is to deconstruct it, much like you would any other process in film. To sum it all up, a film doesn't have to feature real-life objects to be complimented on its cinematography, and CGI is a massively underappreciated art form in the world of film. So from now on, don't just scoff at a film for using computer-rendered effects. Thank you for watching.